They called us the maintenance crew of the galaxy. The janitors. The fix-it species that other civilizations barely acknowledged existed until something broke. For 3 centuries, humans had quietly kept the lights on across 12 star systems, repairing what others built, maintaining what others abandoned, solving problems that advanced species couldn't be bothered with. The Zalari had their perfect crystal cities that never needed cleaning except when they did. The Thaxan Empire built ships that lasted millennia until a single component failed and their entire fleet sat grounded. The Kogari developed energy systems so elegant they transcended physics right up until a power coupling blew and took out half their homeworld's grid. That's when they called the humans. We fixed their mistakes. We solved their oversights. We crawled into the dirty, dangerous places their superior minds never considered. And we did it with a smile, because that's what humans do, we help. But, on the day the last human transport ship disappeared into hyperspace, carrying the final evacuation from Earth, something else disappeared too. Something the galaxy had taken for granted for so long, they'd forgotten it existed at all. The ability to make things work when they shouldn't. The willingness to try impossible solutions. The sheer, stubborn refusal to accept that something can't be fixed. What happened next wasn't just system failures or mechanical breakdowns. It was the slow, creeping realization that an entire galaxy had forgotten how to solve its own problems. Because for 300 years, they hadn't had to. The humans were gone. And everything they'd held together with determination, ingenuity, and an inexplicable talent for making the impossible work was about to fall apart. Commander Zexhai of the Zalari Defense Fleet stared at the diagnostic screen with growing confusion. The readings made no sense. The primary fusion reactor of the ZDS crystalline was operating at optimal parameters, all safety protocols were green, and every automated system confirmed perfect functionality. Yet the ship was losing power. Engineering, report, he commanded through the comm system, his crystalline vocal cords creating harmonics that resonated through the bridge. Silence. He tried again. Still nothing. Subcommander Velterra approached his command station, her own crystal formations dimming with concern. Sir, engineering has been attempting repairs for 6 hours. The human maintenance crew was scheduled to perform routine calibrations today, but they're gone. Zexhai's statement hung in the air like a toxic gas. 3 days ago, the last human transport had departed Earth. 3 days ago, the Galactic Council had officially declared human territory annexed for redistribution. 3 days ago, 12 species had congratulated themselves on finally removing the galaxy's most troublesome problem children. The humans had been nothing but complications. They questioned orders, ignored protocols, and had the audacity to suggest improvements to technology that had worked perfectly for millennia. Good riddance. Except now their ship was dying, and nobody knew why. Sir, incoming priority transmission from Admiral Kethmoran. The main screen flickered to life, revealing the imposing figure of the Zalari Fleet Admiral. His crystal formations were flashing rapid warning colors, never a good sign. Zexhai, what's your status? Experiencing unexplained power fluctuations, Admiral. Engineering is investigating. Investigating. The Admiral's formation shifted to a bitter yellow. Half the fleet is investigating. The Meridian shipyards are investigating. Even the home defense grid is investigating. Do you know what they all have in common? Zexhai's stomach crystallized into ice. They were all maintained by human crews. Every single one. The Admiral's image leaned forward. Get to Sector 7 immediately. The trade station there has gone completely dark. The transmission ended, leaving Zexhai staring at a black screen. He turned to his navigation officer. Set course for Sector 7, maximum speed. Sir, with the power fluctuations, I wouldn't recommend do it. As the crystalline lurched into hyperspace, Zexhai couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Halfway across the galaxy, Senior Engineer Korthak of the Thaxan Empire was having his own revelation. For 40 years, he'd watched human technicians work on Thaxan machinery. He'd always assumed they were following Thaxan procedures, just more slowly and clumsily than a proper Thaxan engineer would. Now, staring at the massive industrial fabricator that had just ground to a halt, he was beginning to understand how wrong he'd been. The machine was perfect. Every component was exactly as designed, every connection precisely as specified in the technical manuals. There was absolutely nothing wrong with it. Which was exactly the problem. Sub-engineer Vexthal, he called to his assistant, a young Thaxan fresh from the engineering academy. Access the fabricator's maintenance logs. Yes, sir. Vexthal's fingers danced across the holographic interface. Displaying now. The logs painted a disturbing picture. Every week for the past 15 years, human technician Jackson Martinez had performed routine maintenance on the fabricator. But, according to the machine's own diagnostic systems, no maintenance had been necessary. Korthak studied the detailed records. Martinez had replaced components that were functioning perfectly. He'd recalibrated systems that were already within optimal parameters. He'd performed preventative maintenance on parts that showed no signs of wear. Sir, Vexthal said hesitantly, these maintenance procedures violate 17 different safety protocols. This human was essentially sabotaging our equipment. But, Korthak was looking deeper into the data. The components Martinez had unnecessarily replaced, they would have failed within the next few weeks. The systems he'd recalibrated would have drifted out of specification within days. The preventative maintenance had prevented failures that the diagnostic systems couldn't even detect yet. He wasn't sabotaging anything, Korthak whispered. He was fixing problems before they became problems. The realization hit him like a collapsing star. The humans hadn't been following Thaxan procedures at all. They'd been doing something else entirely. Something the Thaxan Empire's brilliant engineers had never even conceived of. They'd been thinking ahead. Sir, what should we do about the fabricator? Korthak stared at the machine that had built starships for 3 centuries and was now as dead as a rock. I don't know. It was the first time in his career that senior engineer Korthak had ever spoken those words. On the other side of the sector, Administrator Quilm of the Kogari Central Authority was discovering that perfection had a price. The Kogari energy grid was a masterpiece of engineering. Quantum field generators provided unlimited power by tapping directly into the universe's background energy. The system was so elegantly designed that it required virtually no maintenance, the energy fields themselves prevented any kind of degradation or component failure. It was theoretically impossible for the system to fail. Which made the cascading power failures currently spreading across the Kogari homeworld somewhat awkward to explain. Administrator, his chief technical officer, Nexus Prime 7, spoke through the emergency communication system. The quantum field generators are operating within normal parameters. All safety interlocks are functioning. There is no physical reason for these power failures. Then, why are they happening? Unknown. The human maintenance teams logged several thousand minor adjustments to the system over the past century, but none of their modifications should have any effect on core functionality. Quilm's 4 eyes focused on the data streaming across his workstation. The Kogari were logical beings, evolved from a species that had achieved perfection through pure mathematical reasoning. They didn't believe in intuition, gut feelings, or hunches. Everything could be calculated, predicted, and optimized. But the human modifications to their power grid made no mathematical sense. They'd installed redundant systems where none were needed. They'd created backup protocols for scenarios that could never occur. They'd built in safeguards against failure modes that were theoretically impossible. It was wasteful. Illogical. Completely contrary to proper engineering principles. And, now, as Quilm watched sector after sector of his homeworld go dark, he was beginning to understand that the humans hadn't been wasteful at all. Nexus Prime 7, how long until we can restore full power? A long pause. The Kogari didn't pause unless they were processing something extremely complex. Administrator, we don't know how to fix this. The humans never documented their procedures. They just did things. For the first time in his 300-year career, Administrator Quilm experienced something his species had engineered out of their psychology millennia ago. Panic. Back in Sector 7, Commander Zexhai was staring at something that should have been impossible. The massive trade station hung in space like a dead hulk, but its structure was completely intact. No signs of attack, no evidence of system failure, no indication of why a facility that housed 50,000 beings had suddenly gone silent. Sub-Commander, are you reading any life signs? Minimal, sir. Maybe a few thousand. But the station's life support systems are functioning normally. Zexhai's formation shifted to confused purple. Then, his question was interrupted by an incoming transmission from the station. The image that appeared on screen was barely recognizable as Doktar, the Vorthan Trade Administrator. The usually immaculate being looked haggard, his scales dulled with stress. Commander Zexhai, thank the stars. We need immediate evacuation. What's your situation, Administrator? The station is dying. Doktar's voice cracked. Not from any system failure, everything is working perfectly. But nothing is working together anymore. Explain. The environmental systems are maintaining perfect atmosphere, but the air recyclers aren't coordinating with the temperature controls. The artificial gravity is working, but it's not syncing with the structural integrity fields. The food synthesizers are producing perfectly nutritious meals, but they're not accounting for the dietary needs of different species. Zexhai was beginning to see the pattern. The integration protocols. Managed entirely by the Human Systems Administration team. They didn't just maintain our equipment, they made it all work together. Without them. Doktar gestured helplessly. We have 50,000 beings from 30 different species trying to survive on a station that no longer understands how to keep them all alive at the same time. As if to emphasize his point, the lights on the bridge flickered. Emergency alarms began sounding throughout the trade station. Commander, Velterra said urgently, we're detecting massive systems conflicts throughout the station. Life support is beginning to fail in several sectors. Zexhai made his decision. All ships, begin immediate evacuation of Sector 7 trade station. Priority to vulnerable species and critical personnel. As evacuation ships swarmed around the dying station, Zexhai realized that they were witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. The collapse of civilization not through war, disaster, or conquest, but through the simple absence of beings who had understood how to make incompatible systems work together. The humans had been more than maintenance crews and repair technicians. They'd been the galaxy's integration specialists, the ones who figured out how to make technology from different species work in harmony. And now they were gone. Sir, Velterra said quietly, we're receiving distress calls from 17 other systems. All reporting similar failures. Zexhai stared at the dying trade station and felt something he'd never experienced before, the fear that came from realizing your civilization was built on foundations you'd never bothered to understand. Set course for home, he ordered. And send a priority message to Admiral Kathmoran. Tell him we need to convene an emergency session of the Galactic Council. What should I say the topic is, sir? Zexhai's formations cycle through every color of distress before settling on deep, dark blue. The end of the galaxy as we know it. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in what had once been the most advanced meeting facility in known space. The Grand Assembly Chamber could accommodate representatives from 47 different species, automatically adjusting atmosphere, gravity, lighting, and even temporal perception for each delegate's physiological needs. Today, half the environmental controls were malfunctioning. Council Prime Zephyr of the Eltarian Collective called the session to order while breathing through an emergency atmospheric filter. The chamber's air mixture was apparently optimized for aquatic species, leaving most of the oxygen-breathing delegates gasping. We are gathered to address the complications arising from the recent departure of human populations from Council space, she announced, her voice distorted by the translation matrix that was running 3 minutes behind real-time. Representative Gorthak of the Thaxan Empire slammed a massive fist on his speaking platform. Complications? My entire sector's industrial capacity has dropped by 70%. Our shipyards have ground to a halt. Our mining operations are running on manual control because nobody knows how to fix the automated systems. The situation is equally dire for the Kogari Authority. Administrator Quilm's voice crackled through the failing communication system. Our homeworld is experiencing rolling blackouts. Our quantum field generators are operating perfectly in isolation, but the integration protocols that allowed them to function as a unified grid have completely collapsed. Council Prime Zephyr gestured for order, but the gesture control system interpreted her movement as a request to adjust the chamber's artificial gravity. Several delegates found themselves floating helplessly as the gravity fluctuated between Earth normal and zero. This was not going well. Fleet Admiral Keth Moran of the Zalari managed to activate his speaking platform manually. We've lost 17 major installations in the past week. Trade stations, research facilities, even military outposts. All showing the same pattern: individual systems functioning normally, but unable to coordinate with each other. Perhaps, interjected Duchess Velandra of the Silvani Commonwealth, we are overreacting. Surely our own engineers can adapt to compensate for the absence of human assistance. The chamber fell silent. It was Nexus Prime 7 of the Kogari who finally responded. Your Grace, we have attempted to analyze human maintenance procedures across 300 separate installations. In every case, their methods violated our engineering principles. They used techniques that shouldn't work, implemented solutions that defied our understanding of proper system architecture, and somehow made incompatible technologies function in harmony. They were mechanics, Gorthak growled. Not engineers. Not scientists. They never invented anything. They just fixed things. Yes, Quilm said quietly. They fixed things in ways we never thought to fix them. And we never bothered to learn how. Council Prime Zephyr managed to stabilize her position and activate the main display screen. It showed a real-time map of the galaxy, with system failures marked in red. The display was supposed to update automatically, but it hadn't refreshed in 6 hours. The scope of the crisis is expanding, she announced unnecessarily. We must find a solution. But, even as she spoke, nobody in the chamber was willing to voice the obvious question: what if there wasn't one? Halfway across the galaxy, Dr. Vexlin of the Hegemony Science Institute was discovering exactly how deep the problem ran. The institute prided itself on being the galaxy's foremost research facility. Their laboratories had produced breakthroughs that advanced civilization by centuries. Their scientists had unraveled the fundamental mysteries of the universe. Their technologies had made the impossible routine. And, for the past 4 days, none of their equipment had worked properly. Dr. Vexlin, her research assistant, called from across the quantum physics lab. The particle accelerator is experiencing synchronization errors again. It was the 15th malfunction that morning. Each individual component of the accelerator was functioning perfectly. The magnetic containment fields were stable, the particle injection systems were operating within optimal parameters, and the detection arrays were providing clean readings. But, somehow, the particles being accelerated were arriving at the detection chambers 3 milliseconds before they should have. Which was scientifically impossible. Dr. Vexlin pulled up the maintenance logs, something she'd never bothered to examine before. The accelerator had been serviced twice monthly for the past 22 years by a human technician named Sarah Chen. Chen's maintenance reports were bizarre. She'd consistently adjusted systems that were already calibrated correctly. She'd replaced components that showed no signs of wear. Most puzzling of all, she'd made modifications to the timing circuits that violated basic principles of particle physics. Assistant Colven, Dr. Vexlin called, access the theoretical models for our particle acceleration process. The assistant complied, and Dr. Vexlin compared the theoretical predictions with the actual operational data from before the humans left. The results made her question everything she understood about science. According to theory, the accelerator should have been producing particle streams with 17 different types of quantum fluctuation. Instead, it had been producing perfectly stable streams with no fluctuation at all. According to theory, the magnetic containment field should have required recalibration every 6 hours due to quantum uncertainty. Instead, they had maintained perfect stability for months at a time. According to theory, the entire system should have been impossible to operate without constant supervision by a team of quantum physicists. Instead, Sarachin had kept it running flawlessly with nothing but routine maintenance. Dr. Vexlin, Colvin said hesitantly, I've been reviewing maintenance records from other facilities. The pattern is consistent across all human-maintained equipment. They were somehow making our technology perform beyond theoretical limitations. Dr. Vexlin stared at the data streaming across her workstation. As a scientist, she believed in the supremacy of logical analysis and theoretical understanding. But the evidence was undeniable. The humans had been achieving things that science said were impossible. And they'd been doing it with tools and techniques that no proper scientist would ever consider using. Meanwhile, in the Outer Rim territories, something much worse was happening. Captain Rokhtar of the independent cargo vessel Stellar Wind was running the kind of operation that kept galactic commerce moving. His ship carried everything from exotic foods to industrial components, serving routes that the major shipping lines considered unprofitable. It was honest work that required dealing with dozens of different planetary governments, customs agencies, and trade regulations. The bureaucratic complexity alone was enough to drive most beings insane. Which was why every independent cargo captain in the sector relied on the services of Human Administrative Solutions Incorporated. Or rather, had relied on them. Captain, his first officer announced, were receiving a priority transmission from the Kepler Station Customs Authority. Put them through. The screen displayed Chief Inspector Reltan, whose expression suggested he was about to deliver bad news. Captain Rokhtar, we're going to have to impound your cargo. On what grounds? Import permit discrepancies. Your manifest lists Altarian crystal matrices, but your permits are for Altarian crystal resonators. Different classification codes. Rokhtar blinked. They're the same thing. The classification change was implemented 6 months ago. Not according to our records. Then, check the updated trade regulations. We don't have access to updated regulations. Our administrative coordination system has been offline since the human contractors left. And there it was. Human Administrative Solutions had managed the impossibly complex task of keeping dozens of different bureaucratic systems synchronized. They translated between regulatory frameworks that had evolved separately for centuries. They'd found ways to make contradictory legal codes work together. Now every independent trader in the sector was discovering what interstellar commerce looked like without someone to navigate the bureaucratic maze. Chief Inspector Rokhtar said carefully, "How long is the impoundment expected to last?" "Unknown. We can't process your permits without access to the updated regulatory database. And we can't access the database without the integration protocols that the human team maintained." Rokhtar's cargo hold contained medical supplies destined for a colony world dealing with a plague outbreak. Every day of delay meant more deaths. But the inspector was just doing his job according to regulations that no longer made sense. "Can you recommend an alternative?" "Captain, 17 different cargo vessels have been impounded in the past 3 days. All for similar regulatory conflicts. I wish I could help, but without the human administrative systems." The inspector's expression was genuinely apologetic. "We're all just following rules that were designed to work with coordination systems we no longer have access to." As the transmission ended, Rokhtar realized that the humans hadn't just maintained machinery and computer systems. They'd maintained something much more complex and fragile. They'd maintained the social and economic networks that held galactic civilization together. Back on the Hegemony Science Institute, Dr. Vexlin was making an even more disturbing discovery. She'd spent the past 12 hours analyzing human maintenance procedures from research facilities across the galaxy. What she'd found challenged everything she believed about the nature of scientific progress. The humans hadn't just maintained equipment. They'd maintained the delicate balance that allowed different species technologies to work together. Zalari crystal-based systems operated on harmonic resonance principles. Faxon mechanical engineering relied on precision manufacturing and redundant safety systems. Kogari quantum technologies used mathematical prediction and optimization algorithms. In theory, these different approaches were incompatible. Equipment designed by one species shouldn't work properly when maintained by another species' methods. But, somehow, the humans had made it all work together. Assistant Colvin, she called, accessed the database of human technological innovations. Dr. Vexlin, humans didn't have any major technological innovations. They were considered one of the less advanced species in the council. Then, how were they maintaining our equipment better than we could? The question hung in the air like a toxic gas. Colvin ran the search anyway, and the results were exactly what they'd expected. No major breakthroughs. No revolutionary discoveries. No evidence of advanced scientific understanding. Just thousands upon thousands of small modifications, minor adjustments, and custom solutions that somehow made everything work better. Dr. Vexlin, Colvin said slowly, I think the humans weren't better scientists than us. Obviously not. I think they were better at something else. Something we've forgotten how to do. Dr. Vexlin studied the data one more time. The human modifications weren't based on theoretical understanding or scientific principles. They were based on observation, experimentation, and an intuitive understanding of how complex systems actually behaved in practice. The humans had been engineers in the truest sense, not builders of new technology, but masters of making existing technology work in the real world. And now the galaxy was learning what happened when perfectly designed technology met imperfect reality without anyone who knew how to bridge the gap. Colvin, she said finally, send a message to the Galactic Council. Tell them we need to reconvene the emergency session. What should I say the topic is? Dr. Vexlin looked at her perfectly designed laboratory that no longer worked properly and felt the weight of galactic civilization pressing down on her shoulders. Tell them we need to discuss the possibility of asking the humans to come back. The words felt like admitting defeat. But, as another piece of equipment malfunctioned in the background, Dr. Vex_Lin realized that pride was a luxury they could no longer afford. The galaxy was falling apart, one perfectly designed system at a time. The second emergency session of the Galactic Council was held in a maintenance hangar because the Grand Assembly Chamber had completely failed. Half the delegates attended via remote connection because their ships couldn't dock with stations whose coordination protocols no longer functioned. Council Prime Zephyr opened the session while manually adjusting her breathing apparatus. Dr. Vexlin of the Hegemony Science Institute has requested an urgent consultation regarding possible solutions to our current crisis. Dr. Vexlin appeared on the main display screen, transmitted from her laboratory which was now running on emergency power. Honored delegates, our analysis has concluded that the scope of this crisis extends far beyond mechanical failures or administrative difficulties. Representative Gorthak of the Thaxon Empire interrupted. Doctor, my shipyards have been offline for 2 weeks. My manufacturing facilities are producing components that don't fit together properly. Just tell us how to fix this. That's precisely the problem, Representative. We don't know how to fix anything anymore. The statement sent a ripple of confusion through the assembled delegates. For 3 centuries, Dr. Vexlin continued, we have designed our technologies to be perfect. Self-maintaining, self-optimizing, theoretically flawless. We believed this represented the pinnacle of engineering achievement. It does, Administrator Quilm protested. Our quantum field generators are mathematical perfection given physical form. Yes. And they're failing because perfection cannot adapt to imperfection. Our technologies were designed to work in ideal conditions, with perfect components, following perfect procedures. But reality is not perfect. Fleet Admiral Keth Moran leaned forward in his chair. Explain. Every piece of equipment in this galaxy operates in environments that don't match design specifications. Components age in ways that theory doesn't predict. Systems interact with each other in ways that weren't anticipated. The universe itself introduces variables that our perfect designs cannot account for. Dr. Vexlin paused, letting the implications sink in. The humans compensated for all of that. Not through better technology, but through better understanding of how imperfect technology behaves in an imperfect universe. They made our perfect systems work in reality. Duchess Valandra of the Sylvani Commonwealth spoke up. Are you suggesting we redesign our entire technological infrastructure? I'm suggesting that might be impossible. The humans didn't just maintain our equipment, they developed an institutional knowledge base spanning 3 centuries. Every trick, every workaround, every solution to problems we didn't know existed. That knowledge base left with them. The hangar fell silent except for the humming of backup generators that were themselves beginning to show signs of strain. Council Prime Zephyr finally spoke. Dr. Vexlin, what are you proposing? That we attempt to contact the humans and request their assistance. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Delegates began shouting in 17 different languages while the translation system struggled to keep up. Unthinkable! Gorthak roared. We ejected them from council space for a reason. They were disruptive, insubordinate, and dangerous to galactic stability. And, now we're discovering, Dr. Vexlin replied calmly, that they were also essential to galactic functionality. Administrator Quilm's image flickered as his connection struggled with power fluctuations. Even if we wanted to contact them, we don't know where they went. Actually, a new voice spoke from the back of the hangar, we do. Every delegate turned to see Captain Rocktar of the independent cargo vessel Stellar Wind. He wasn't supposed to be at the council session, but, given that security systems were malfunctioning throughout the facility, his presence wasn't entirely surprising. Captain, Council Prime Zephyr said with as much authority as she could muster while breathing through an emergency filter, this is a closed session. With respect, Prime, my cargo ship is one of the few vessels in this sector that's still fully operational. And, it's operational because I hired human engineers to design custom integration protocols for mixed-species technology. Rocktar stepped forward, his bulk impressive even among the various alien physiologies present. I know where the humans went because I've been in contact with their colonial fleet. They're establishing new settlements in the outer spiral, about 6 months' journey from here. You've been in contact with them? Admiral Kethmoran's formation shifted to suspicious yellow. How? Because unlike the rest of you, I never stopped treating them like valuable partners instead of glorified janitors. The barb hit home. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably. The humans saw this coming, Rocktar continued. They knew that ejecting them from council space would cause massive system failures. They tried to warn the council about the integration dependencies, but you were too busy congratulating yourselves on getting rid of the problem species to listen. Dr. Vexlin leaned forward. Captain, would they be willing to return? I don't know. Would you be willing to return to work for people who treated you like second-class citizens for 3 centuries, then kicked you out the moment they thought they didn't need you anymore? The question hung in the artificial atmosphere like a challenge. It was Administrator Quilm who finally broke the silence. What would it take? Rocktar considered the question carefully. Full restoration of human citizenship rights. Representation on the Galactic Council proportional to their population. And formal recognition of their technical contributions to galactic infrastructure. Impossible, Gorthak growled. The Council Charter doesn't allow for species that lack significant technological innovations to hold major positions. Then, change the Charter, Dr. Vexlin said bluntly. Because the alternative is watching our civilization collapse one system at a time. Council Prime Zephyr felt the weight of galactic history pressing down on her shoulders. The Galactic Council had been founded on principles of technological advancement and scientific achievement. Species earned membership based on their contributions to the greater galactic knowledge base. The humans had never qualified under those criteria. They hadn't invented faster-than-light travel, or developed new energy sources, or created revolutionary medical technologies. They just made things work. But, now it was becoming clear that making things work might be the most valuable technological contribution of all. Captain Rocktar, she said finally, would you be willing to carry a diplomatic message to the human colonial fleet? Depends on the message. Council Prime Zephyr looked around at the assembled delegates, reading the desperation in their expressions even through failing translation systems and flickering holographic displays. An apology. And a request for help. The words felt like swallowing poison. But, as another system failure alarm echoed through the hangar, Zephyr realized that pride was a luxury they could no longer afford. 6 months later, the first human technical teams returned to Council space aboard Captain Rocktar's cargo vessel and a small fleet of human support ships. Commander Sarah Chan, former maintenance chief of the Sector 7 trade station, stood in the observation deck of her ship as they approached the massive facility she'd once called home. The station was still there, but it was operating on emergency power and had clearly been abandoned by all but essential personnel. "Ma'am," her assistant called from the communications station, "we're being hailed by station control." "Put them through." The image that appeared on screen was Doktar, the Vorthan administrator she remembered from before the evacuation. He looked terrible, scales dulled by stress, eyes haunted by weeks of crisis management. "Commander Chen," he said, and his voice carried a weight of emotion that his species typically kept carefully controlled. "Thank the stars you're here." "Administrator. What's the current situation?" 17 major system conflicts, cascading failures in 3 separate sectors, and we're running on emergency life support for about 60% of the station. "Oh, and the artificial gravity is fluctuating randomly." Sarah studied the diagnostic data streaming across her workstation. It was bad, but not unfixable. "How long do you estimate for repairs?" Dok_Tar asked hopefully. Sarah Chan smiled for the first time in 6 months. "Give me 4 hours and a decent cup of coffee. I'll have your station running better than it ever did before." 4 hours? But our engineers estimated at least 3 months of work. "Administrator," Sarah said gently, "your engineers are brilliant at building perfect systems. But I'm good at making broken systems work." As her team prepared to dock with the station, Sarah reflected on the past 6 months. The human colonial fleet had established thriving settlements in the outer spiral. They'd built cities that worked, created technologies that adapted, and developed solutions to problems they'd never encountered before. They'd proven, once and for all, that there was more than one way to achieve technological advancement. But they'd also learned something else. For all their independence and self-reliance, they missed being part of something larger. They missed the challenge of making incompatible technologies work together. They missed the satisfaction of solving problems that others thought were impossible. They missed helping. "Commander," her communications officer called, "we're receiving docking clearance from station control." "Take us in," Sarah ordered. "We've got work to do." As the human technical teams began working throughout the station, something remarkable happened. Systems that had been failing for months began functioning properly. Equipment that had been running on backup power switched back to primary systems. The artificial gravity stabilized. But, more importantly, the various alien engineering teams began watching the human techniques, asking questions, and slowly starting to understand. Dr. Vexlin, who had traveled to the station specifically to observe the repairs, found herself fascinated by the human approach to problem solving. "Commander Chen," she called across the engineering section, "could you explain why you're replacing that power coupling? Our diagnostics show it's functioning normally." Sarah looked up from her work. "It is functioning normally. But see this discoloration here? That indicates it's been operating under thermal stress. Give it another 2 weeks and it would have failed catastrophically, taking out half the power grid." "How did you know to look for that?" "Experience. This type of coupling has a specific failure pattern when it's installed in this configuration. You learn to recognize the warning signs." Dr. Vexlin made notes on her portable workstation. "But that's not documented in any technical manual." "No," Sarah agreed, "it's not. Because whoever designed this system never expected it to be installed next to a Thaxan gravity generator and a Kogari quantum field emitter. The interaction between those 3 technologies creates thermal stress patterns that weren't anticipated in the original design. How many such interaction patterns have you identified?" Sarah paused in her work to consider the question. For this class of station? Maybe 3 or 4,000. 3 or 4,000 undocumented system interactions? Just for this class of station. Every installation is different because every installation combines technologies from different species in ways that the original designers never imagined. Dr. Vexlin felt her understanding of engineering undergo a fundamental shift. She'd always believed that proper design meant anticipating every possible scenario. But the humans had taken a different approach. Instead of trying to predict every possible problem, they'd learned to recognize and solve problems as they emerged. Dr. Vexlin, Sarah said as she secured the replaced coupling, would you like to learn how to diagnose thermal stress patterns? It was a simple question, but Dr. Vex_Lin recognized it as something much more significant. It was an offer to learn a different way of thinking about technology. Yes, she said. I would. As the human teams worked throughout the galaxy, teaching their techniques to engineers from dozens of different species, a new understanding began to emerge. Perfect systems were beautiful in theory, but adaptable systems were essential in practice. The galaxy was learning that true technological advancement wasn't just about building better machines, it was about building better relationships between machines, and between the beings who use them. And, sometimes, the most important innovation was simply learning how to help each other solve problems together. The humans were home.